Okay, so now we have some for the alto clef and the tenor clef. It's first good to just understand where we are in these clefs. So the first line below the treble clef is middle C, along with the first line above the bass clef is also middle C. So that's where those clefs meet up. But also middle C is the middle note, or in other words, the middle line of the alto clef. So we need to change our way of thinking. We could come up with some methods of doing this, but the simplest method is simply thinking that normally your middle line is B in a treble clef. So all we got to do is think that we're looking at the treble clef, but every time we see a note, we just think one note above that. And again, in the clefs, nothing natural flat is changing. It's just the shifting of the note. When we start getting into transpositions and reading transpositional instruments or instruments that are in a different key, then things are going to get a little more complicated. And also, when you get to that point, it's going to be really good to know how to read your different clefs and also understanding your inverted intervals. It's going to be a huge help if you want to read transpositional instruments. Okay, so we already know our middle line is C. We also know the trick that whatever note we're looking at, we're thinking a note above that. So normally middle line is B, now we're thinking C. Okay, so that's the alto clef. And now I'm going to explain the tenor clef because it's super simple and it's basically the same thing but the other way. Okay, so when we look at a tenor clef, you think of every note you're looking at but one note lower. Okay, so we think of the middle line of the tenor clef. Normally in a treble clef we'd have B, so now we just think we have an A. Okay, so let's go to this one. Normally in a treble clef, we'd have the note D. Now we have the note C, and this is actually middle C. So as you can see, the tenor clef looks like an alto clef. The only difference is that it's shifted up a third. The actual clef is shifted up a third, as you can see. So that's how you can tell that it's the tenor clef, but that's also how you can tell where the position of the notes are. So as you can see, the middle of the clef is still intersecting with C, and that is in fact still middle C. The order of the clefs is soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, thinking from the top down. So you see that these clefs are actually very close to each other. Okay, so now we know how to read the alto clef and the tenor clef. You're always going to be seeing the alto clef if you're reading pieces that have a viola in it, because the viola is going to be scored most of the time in a alto clef. Sometimes it might be scored in a treble clef if the notes get high enough. But also the cello can be scored in the tenor clef and also the treble clef if it gets high enough. Not only can this be easier to read with less ledger lines, but it can also be an easier way to communicate with the player exactly where they are in the register. Okay, so now we know the purposes of these clefs, and we know that the tenor clef is not just some clef that's never used, because you may not see it very often even if you do a lot of score reading. So now everything I've explained already explains this, but let's name the intervals. Okay, so I'm only going to do this in the beginning, but remember we're looking at an alto clef, so it looks like we're looking at a B if we're in treble clef, so we know we're one note above that. It's C, and then if we think a third above that, C, E. Okay, so key of C major, we have an E, we have a major third. Next we have one line below. Normally that's a C, but in this case it would be a D. Then we have what normally would be an A, so it's just a B. So now we have a D, B, and that makes sense because we can see it's a sixth. So now we think the key of D major, so F sharp and C sharp, and we have a B natural. So that's in the key, so we have a major sixth. Okay, next we see an E flat and a fifth above that, so a B. So in the key of E flat, we have B flat, E flat, and A flat. And above that we have a B, but it's not flat. So because it is one semitone above a perfect fifth, it is an augmented fifth. Okay, next we see the bottom note is, and we have another fifth. So we just think E. So it's just an E natural, and that's because the note before it is an E flat. I could have taken that out, but I think it's good to realize this because you're going to see this in music to where you're going to see an accidental marked on a note, but it's just going to be a natural. So if you aren't familiar, it's just good to familiarize yourself with stuff like this. So again, we're looking at an A and an E natural. We're going to think of the key of A major, so F, C, and G sharp. and we have an E natural, so that's in the key, so we have a perfect fifth. Okay, next we see a G sharp and an E natural. G sharp is not a actual key, so that's going to be a little confusing if we think about an enharmonic, because that would be the note above it but flat. So I'm going to do the trick that I explained. First I'm going to see, okay, it's a sixth, so I'm just going to think rearranged as a third. So I'm first just going to think E to G. So I know that I'm starting on E, it's missing a sharp, so I have a minor third, but I'm going from E to G sharp, so now I think, okay, now I have a major third. And then I just think, okay, I take that major third and I invert it, now I have a minor sixth. Now I have a minor sixth. Okay, next I have a B and then a fifth above that. If you know your C major scale, you know that B to F is a tritone. So that'd be a diminished fifth, but you have B to F sharp. So you automatically know this is a perfect fifth. But let's think about the method. So we're in B major. So we have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. And of course the first one, F sharp, we have an F sharp right there. So we have that perfect fifth. So before moving on, I could also just go back to the last one and think in context of what's going on there. That's the fourth and the seventh degree of the major scale creates a tritone. So F to B, or the seventh degree to the fourth degree, B to F. So either way, it's a tritone, because if you invert a tritone, it's a tritone. B to F or F to B, it's 6 semitones apart. So it's half of an octave every time, no matter which way it is. So you could take that trick and translate it to other keys. So when you're in other keys, when you ever have the fourth and the seventh, or the seventh and fourth degree, creating an harmonic interval or a melodic interval, then you know it's creating a tritone. Okay, next we have a D, F third. Okay, so we think of the key of D major, we have an F sharp and C sharp, and we have an F natural here. So now we know that it's a minor third. And also the simple trick of knowing that if it's going from D to F, you could think that what are those notes progressing through? D, E, F. So when D goes to F, since it has to pass through E to get there, it's going to be missing that sharp because E doesn't have a sharp. In other words, F doesn't have a flat. There's no note in between E and F. Okay, so automatically know that's a minor third. Okay, so now what happens if we take D and F here and we invert it? It would become what interval? It would become a sixth. And what kind of interval? What kind of sixth? Since it's a minor, now it's a major sixth. Okay, next we have a G natural and an A. So G to A, that's only a note apart. So we know that's normally a second. That's obviously bigger than a second, but it's the same note. So it's a compound second. And it's actually just one note above an octave because of that. Okay, so I should mention this, that when you have a compound interval, that its quality doesn't change. So if it's a major, minor, whatever it is, it stays exactly the same because you're using the same exact notes. Okay, so all we need to realize that it's the notes G and A, so it's a second apart. Okay, so in the key of G major, we have F sharp, and we have an A here, so A is also in the key, so we have a major second. You can also think that in between G and A, there's a note. So there's G sharp or there's A flat in between that. Well, if you had it like an E to an F, you automatically know that's a minor second because there's that note missing in between E and F. There's no E sharp and there's no F flat. Okay, so now moving on to the tenor clef, just a quick refreshment. The first interval we're looking at is the same as the alto clef. So you see it's the same thing, just shifted up. The middle C is still right there. So now we see we're looking at a C and an E. Okay, C major, all natural notes. We have an E natural, we have a major third. Again, I'm just going to do this in the beginning. So normally in a treble clef, we'd see a B here. But since we're in the tenor clef, we're thinking about a note below an A. Then above that, we see a seventh, but it's always good just to read the note. And if you're proficient at reading, then it's a sure way of knowing what you're looking at. Okay, so normally we'd have an A in treble clef, so now we'd have a G. Okay, so we have the note A and G making a seventh. And in fact, we're looking at a G natural, so not a G sharp. So now we know it's a minor seventh. But now we can also think about the quick trick of going back semitones. So we go from A, we go backwards, we have G sharp, that would be our first semitone back, so that would be a major seventh. But in fact, we have a G natural, so we know we have a minor seventh. And of course, if we had a G flat, then we'd have a diminished seventh. Next, we see an interval of D, G. So now we're going to think the key of D major, F sharp, C sharp. We're looking at a G natural, so that is in the key. So we know we have a perfect fourth. This next one's actually really easy. So we have a C sharp. Anytime you see a C sharp, you know that the key of C sharp has all sharps in it. Every note is sharp. So therefore, if you see a note that's not a sharp, it's not in the key. And of course, if it was flat, then it'd be actually two semitones below the notes that would be in the key. So if we think of a C sharp fifth, G would be the note above it. This one's obvious in so many ways because normally C and G would be a perfect fifth, of course, but we have C sharp. And like I was saying, every single note in C sharp is sharp. So this is not G sharp. So we know that it's a note lower than what would be in the key. So it's a diminished fifth. Okay, next we see a B and an E. And we can see that it's a fourth. So B major, we have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. And we have an E natural, so that is in the key, so it's a perfect fourth. Okay, next we have a third starting from D, so we have a D and an F, both natural. We think of the key of D major, and we have F sharp and C sharp. And since we have an F natural, we know it's a minor third. And also, if you think D to F, that progression of notes is D, E, F, so with E you're missing that sharp. Okay, next a fifth starting from B flat, so B flat and F. Let's work it out. B flat major has the notes B flat and E flat. We have F natural, so it's in the key, a perfect fifth. Okay, next we have an E flat to an F. E flat major, B flat, E flat, and A flat. Okay, so we have an F natural, so that is in the key, so we're looking at a major second. That's it for this video. I have two videos after this coming up. Tendency tones and hidden octaves and fifths. So be sure to check those out. Those are going to be really good for understanding voice leading. And be sure to check out my other videos. I have videos all the way from the very basic beginner stuff, learning how to read music, sharps, flats, major scales, slowly building up to now more stuff centered around composing. Also, if you check out my playlists, I have quite a few playlists about learning how to understand music. Thanks for watching.